Hey friends, on today's episode, I sit down with Brian Kaylor and Beau Underwood, co-authors of Baptizing America, How Mainline Protestants Helped Build Christian Nationalism. Brian is a Baptist minister with a PhD in political communication, a former professor of political communication and advocacy studies. He's also the editor-in-chief of Word and Way. Beau Underwood is the senior minister of Allisonville Christian Church in Indianapolis, Indiana. He has graduate degrees in both religion and public policy from the University of Chicago, and he's currently a doctoral candidate in public affairs at the University of Missouri. In this episode, it is safe to say that I am not the smartest person in the room, but we have a great time nevertheless. You'll learn some very sobering information about the mainline church and Christian nationalism. We talk about faith and public policy, and you will see some shade thrown by one of us who has apparently won an award for comedy writing. I promise you, you will be smarter after this episode, and you will laugh along the way. Thanks for spending time with the Amalgamation, and I hope you enjoy my conversation with Beau Underwood and Brian Kaylor. My name is Bruce Reyes-Chow, and you found the Amalgamation Podcast. Each episode, I chat with inspiring humans, activists, artists, academics, and adventurers as we joyfully and courageously co-conspire to make the world a more loving, compassionate, and just home for everyone. Welcome to the Amalgamation. All right. Well, welcome to the next episode of the Amalgamation Podcast. I'm here with Brian Kaylor and Beau Underwood. We're part of a writing crew for Chalice Press, but also it's that whole thing where podcasters interview podcasters. There's something weird about that, but that's what we're doing. So I'm glad you're here. As we do here on the podcast, I'll go and ask folks to just introduce what's important to know about you, both professionally, personally. What do you want out on the interwebs for the rest of your life? So Brian, I'll invite you first. What's important for us to know about you?
Sure. I'm a Baptist minister with a PhD in political communication. I lead Word and Way, which has been around since 1896. We have a podcast that you've been on, Dangerous Dogma, people can find.
I was just going to say, wait, I know that.
Yeah. And so it's great to talk with you again and kind of flip the direction on who gets to ask all the questions.
Great.
So I'm a Disciples of Christ pastor in Indianapolis, Indiana. I'm a husband and a father to a wonderful 6-year-old, and I am also a PhD student in public policy. So I like to tell people that I'm a terrible dinner companion because the only thing I know how to talk about are religion and politics.
Or you're like the perfect one, depending on the crew, which I would not go to that dinner party, by the way. So just as long as I had fair warning. So basically, I am now sitting in a room with very smart people. So I'll just apologize ahead of time. I get to ask the questions that everybody wants to ask. It's like, oh, I actually have a child who's entering a PhD program now. And it's clear when she talks to us, she's talking down to us at this point. She's just, I'm now going to try to tell you as a kindergartner, I'm like, thank you, honey, that actually we need that. So, well, I'm glad you all are on. I don't know if you've noticed, but the world seems like it's burning down. It seems like everywhere I go to speak, we start off with just taking a deep breath and exhaling together. And it just feels like the churches that I'm invited to speak at or engaged with are all trying to figure out what happened, and then what do we do? And I was able to kind of breeze through the book with this whole idea where you're talking like some of this is what we've done. I mean, we have played a role in creating this thing we like to dismiss as, Christian nationalism and bad over there. I love the beginning where you just like, here's what somebody said, and we all assume who it's going to be, and it ends up to be Michael Curry. So tell me a little bit about, one of you go ahead and tell us a little about how the book started, Baptizing America. So tell us how it all began.
Yeah, so Brian and I have been writing about Christian nationalism on our Substack, A Public Witness, for some time. And as we were covering it and its developments, we kept having this conversation about how so much of what we were seeing in the present context had roots in the past. And a lot of those roots were in the mainline Protestant church, and yet nobody was saying that. So after having that conversation half a dozen times ourselves, we thought, well, let's write that up. So we wrote an op-ed for what was then called Religion and Politics, a publication out of Washington University in St. Louis. And we thought we'll let the sociologists, the theologians, the historians that are all smarter than us shoot that thesis down. And instead, we got a lot of positive feedback. Yes, this was a story that needed to be told. This is a missing piece of the conversation. And they were really glad to see somebody talking about it. So we got together with Chalice Press and said, can we turn this idea piece into a book? And the book, Baptizing America, How Mainline Protestants Helped to Build Christian Nationalism, is that story. What we're seeing today in terms of the Christian nationalism that does seem to be all around us, how did it come to be, and how did the mainline Protestant tradition accidentally contribute to that? One of the most interesting stories, one of the most disappointing stories, is actually how the words "under God" even got into the Pledge of Allegiance, which is one of those data points that David Barton and some of the sort of, evangelical or right-wing pseudo-historians use to point to when they claim we are a Christian nation. So Brian tells the story better than I do, so I'll kick it to him. But I think it's a great example about how we mainline Protestants contributed to the problem we're dealing with today.
Yeah, so when the Pledge of Allegiance was first written by a Baptist socialist pastor, and I maybe should pause because I know a lot of people are like, Baptist socialist, those two words don't go together.
What's happening?
Yeah, I know, right? I mean, Roger Stone called me a Marxist pastor, so I mean, it can happen. But unlike me, Francis Bellamy actually claimed the socialist title. So in fact, that's why he got fired from his Baptist church, was because of his socialism and his involvement in the Christian Socialist Society. So he's unemployed as a pastor, and he's working for a magazine who funds itself by selling American flags. And so they thought it'd be good for business, basically, to write a pledge to the flag. And so this Baptist minister writes the pledge and leaves God out of it. And it stays that way for over 60 years. And then it all changes really quickly because of one sermon. Reverend George Dockery, who was the pastor at New York Avenue Presbyterian Church in Washington, D.C. It's a couple of blocks from the White House. Yep. Abraham Lincoln had attended there a few times while he was in office. And so they make a big deal about Lincoln.
You can sit in the Lincoln pew, actually, there, which I would never do because I would not want to be the person that breaks it. I mean, that would be like, oh, yeah, you're the one who sat in the pew.
You don't want to sleep where Lincoln slept during sermons?
Or just spills your coffee, and it's like then everybody else thinks that stain is from Abraham Lincoln. It's like, nope, that was just for me last week.
They had lattes then? What is going on? We had no idea. Anyway, sorry, just go ahead. Keep going.
So, but the Lincoln pew is part of the story here, right? So for Lincoln Sunday in February, the Sunday closest to Lincoln's birthday, Dwight D. Eisenhower, who was president, 1954, is going to come and be sitting in Lincoln's pew because when you're the president, you get to sit there. And so Reverend Dockery knows that this is going to happen. And so he writes his sermon basically for an audience of one, which I don't know. I mean, Bruce, if you've ever just been tempted to write a sermon for one person in the congregation, I don't think it's necessarily the best pastoral approach. Though I've never had the president.
And then stare at them the whole time?
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. I've never had the president, so I probably would be tempted to write a sermon just for one person, so I won't be too hard on him for that. But the whole point of the sermon is, under God should be added to the Pledge of Allegiance. That's his application. That's his takeaway. He was from Scotland. He grew up, saying God bless the Queen, right?
Damn Presbyterians, man, what is happening?
I know.
And the thing about this guy is he's a progressive, right?
Yeah, we'll get there. Slow down.
All right.
Slow down. First, we got to set him up as the villain before we resurrect him a little bit here, all right? His image. So he gives this whole sermon, and it's what we would call Christian nationalism, right? This is the defining characteristic of American life. We need to be saying God just like they do in England. The United States was founded, he says, on the Ten Commandments and the gospel of Jesus. Right? He makes this whole case, and it works, right? So the very next day, members of Congress are writing, asking for copies of his sermon. It goes out in newspapers and on the radio. This was back in the time when they would put the news clips on the movie theaters, before the main attraction. So they played clips of his sermon in the movie theaters across the country as the news before the main attraction. So within 4 months, everyone in Congress has passed legislation to add under God to the Pledge of Allegiance. President Eisenhower signs it on Flag Day, June 14th, 1954. And just like that, because of one sermon, the Pledge of Allegiance has changed, which is impressive. I mean, I don't know about you. I'm just excited when someone remembers my sermon a week later.
Yeah. If I could have one of those.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Right? But he changes the Pledge of Allegiance after, 60 years. And so that's one thing one reason why I like this story is that it makes it really clear. Like, here we have a mainline Protestant minister who's really solely responsible for changing that. And then also, of course, we had a Presbyterian president as well, right? Eisenhower had been baptized while president in a different Presbyterian church there in D.C. But the other reason that's really important about this story is that Reverend Dockery says the quiet part out loud. He explains how Christian nationalism is unintentionally, he explains how it's anti-democratic, how it's exclusionary. Because as he's going along in his sermon, he acknowledges, well, if we do this, there might be some people who can't say the pledge because they don't believe in God. But Reverend Dockery doesn't care because he says, you know what? An atheistic American is a contradiction in terms. And then adds in his sermon that they really are spiritual parasites. So he's willing to...
When are we getting into the part of redemption here?
Give me a minute. So he's willing to civically excommunicate Americans simply because of their religious beliefs. And that's Christian nationalism, right? This confusing of American and Christian identities. And it's even more problematic today when we have a society that's more pluralistic, where a greater number of Americans don't identify. And so that Christian nationalism becomes even more problematic. But here's the part that's redemptive of I'll give the praise for Reverend Dockery, because he's a prophetic figure in a lot of ways. When Bloody Sunday happens and Martin Luther King Jr. puts out the plea for white ministers to come march, Reverend Dockery goes and marches in Selma with King. Later has King come and preach in his white church in D.C. just a couple months before King is assassinated. And Reverend Dockery himself preaches against the Vietnam War while Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara is in the congregation, right? So, he's a really inspiring progressive minister who's trying to make the nation better, but then he's also a Christian nationalist. He wants the nation to be a Christian nation. And the sad irony here is that he created part of the infrastructure by putting under God into the Pledge of Allegiance that is now used by right-wing Christian nationalists to tear down and undo everything that he wanted, right? So he was trying to make a progressive Christian nation, but he's created the weapons that are being used to make a conservative Christian nation. And I think it shows that the answer that we're looking for here isn't to replace conservative Christian nationalism with progressive Christian nationalism. But how do we move away from Christian nationalism of any flavor?
Right. And I think that it just also really demonstrates that there's so much desire in mainline circles, progressive Christian circles, to otherize this problem, to say it's them, it's those bad people doing this thing, and look how righteous and good we are that we're not like them. And again, part of the story of the book was just to correct that narrative and that thinking, because we're never going to solve this if we can't look at ourselves in the mirror and be honest about the ways we've been complicit.
Right. Mainline smugness is the real deal. It is talking about music. I was just having conversations at a church a couple weeks ago, and they're like, well, that 7-Eleven music where, it's the same 7 words. I'm like Tazay, like that. Like, I was just like, I love it. I have so many questions for you all at this moment. But can you define, if there are people, I do about half religion, half other like pop culture people and all that stuff. Define, as if you were my child talking down to me, what is Christian nationalism? Because I think we throw that around a lot, and I think people, we know we don't want it. But if you were just to define, what does that mean? Like, what's the definition of Christian nationalism from your perspectives?
Yeah. All right, Dad, let me explain this to you here. Christian nationalism is when we take our identities as Americans and we fuse them with our identity as Christians. And we say that to be a good American is to be a good Christian, especially a certain kind of Christian, a conservative Christian, a Christian who believes in sort of traditional social hierarchies. And to be a good Christian is to be a good American. It's to cheer the country on no matter what, and to sacralize the nation and make it feel like it's God's chosen vessel in the world. Mm-hmm. And sociologists study this. They can map this. This isn't just something we've invented. It's something we can have some data for. It's something we can put some numbers to. It's a real phenomenon, and it's an ideology that is very active in our society right now and has been very active historically. And as Brian mentioned, it at its worst, it's anti-democratic. It can condone violence. It can make it hard to critique the nation when the nation errs. And it can leave just a lot of people feeling like they're left out of our civic life.
Yeah, and I would add to that, it's important to recognize, so we sometimes also use the term white Christian nationalism. Mm-hmm. And in the United States context, we use those synonymously. You can see Christian nationalism and religious nationalism in other countries. But in the United States context, Christian nationalism is also closely tied to white racism. And so it's important to recognize that. The sociology research shows us that people that score high on Christian nationalism, that are really ambassadors and really want to see more Christian nationalism, are also more likely to hold racist opinions, like believing that interracial marriage is wrong, believing that there's not a problem with police brutality against black young men, to believe that the real people who are persecuted against in America are white men, right? So there's something happening here in this worldview. And I think it makes sense in the United States context that Christian nationalism is white Christian nationalism, because if you're saying that the United States was founded as a, quote, Christian nation, which is the claim, and that's not true, maybe we can unpack that if you want, but if you're saying we were founded as a Christian nation, you're talking about a nation that was founded on the genocide of Native Americans and the enslavement of black Africans, which doesn't sound Christian to me. But if it was only ever for white people. It was a nation founded for white Christians at best. And so it makes sense that myth we tell ourselves about the founding of the nation is also upholding racist opinions today.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. You were better than my child does to me. So thank you very much. Appreciate that. So how does it get tied to legislation, public policy? Is theocracy and Christian nationalism? Is that, how does it make this jump into I know you all talk about January 6th. I have a book that just came out. I was laughing as I was reading the book. I'm like, oh, apparently there's a whole season of us. We all started with January 6th as this kind of marker of our time. But what's the connection or the overlap or the cause into what we're seeing kind of in our public policy and legislation right now? Does it automatically go there, or yeah, talk about that for a minute.
Yeah. So as Brian mentioned, I really like the word worldview here, right? Because it means that there's this all-encompassing way of seeing things. And obviously, if you have people who have that worldview and they get elected to office, there's this temptation to try to enact that worldview. I think some of this is a reaction to the decline of Christian practice and Christian and church attendance in our society, where it's like, if we can't get to them in the Sunday schools and the churches, well, let's go try to get to them in the public schools and the legislatures. So I think we're seeing a lot of that going on. My favorite example is there was a bill in Idaho in this last legislative session. I don't think it passed, but there was this bill that would require, over the course of a public school's students' education, so K through 12, that they would hear the whole Bible read to them in public school. Right, which I think that means whoever sponsored that bill has never read the whole Bible.
Exactly.
Because I'm just imagining sex ed going on in middle school and they're reading Song of Songs, right? I'm imagining people falling asleep reading the Book of Numbers, right? It's just.
But if they use the Precious Moments version, I think it's probably okay.
But it just points out what a farce this is to we're trying to inculcate a certain brand of Christianity that isn't all that concerned with actually being Christian. It's concerned with the symbolism of Christians having social power. And that's what it's used for. It's used to create a certain order, to uphold that social order, to advance certain values that are Christian in name only.
Right. It's doing a lot of what Reverend Dockery said, right? The atheists were spiritual parasites, right? A contradiction in terms. So it's marking who's the real Americans. And so that's what's still happening today with Christian nationalism. And the Idaho bill didn't pass, but we are seeing a number of other bills pass, right, that are attempting to mark, particularly in public schools. That's the big battleground right now for pushing Christian nationalism, to mark not just that Christianity, but just one slice of conservative Christianity is the real Christianity and the real America. Right? You can look at this, say, with the Ten Commandment bills. Yep. Which were introduced in more than 20 states this year alone. It's passed in Louisiana last year, and then Texas and Arkansas this year. And it's a real push to go and post the 10 Commandments in public school classrooms, which is the government picking winners and losers when it comes to religion. Because, and when we say the 10 Commandments, we should probably clarify, it's actually only posting a highly edited version of the 10 Commandments. Most of the words are actually cut out. I did a word count. 37% of the 10 Commandments are all that will be on these posters that Louisiana, really? Texas, and Arkansas have passed. In the bill, it says, this is what you have to put on the wall word for word. And it's only 37% of the text. And so they've cut out, right? Like they've canceled 2/3 of what, God told Moses here. And some of it's like really theological stuff, right? So, the opening line of the posters is, I am the Lord thy God. And then it says, period. But there's not a period in the text. It says, whom have brought thee out of Egypt, out of slavery, right? Which of course, I guess we can't do because that would be too much DEI in the schools. So we can't talk about saving people from slavery today. They also change in the coveting section. It says that you cannot covet your neighbor's cattle, which is not what the King James says, which is what the rest of the posters are taken from. It says, nor his ox, nor his ass. Right. And so I don't know if they're saying it's okay to covet your neighbor's donkeys now, or if they just wanted to censor the word ass out of the Bible. But like there's rewriting scripture and putting it in a Protestant version, right? So Jews order the Ten Commandments a little bit differently. Catholics order it a little bit different. Lutherans are more like Catholics in that regard, but the rest of the Protestant family, right? And so what's going to happen is kids are going to go to school and be told, this is the Ten Commandments, although you can't find a single Bible that has the Ten Commandments in that language, and that this is the order of the Ten Commandments, and your parents and your house of worship are wrong. Mm. They're teaching you wrong. Or worse, if you don't even believe in a faith tradition that has the Ten Commandments, you're being told you're not a real American in your own school unless you start to believe this. So that's really what Christian nationalism is doing. It's a power move to stamp who's the real Americans, who gets to run this country. And it really doesn't advance any good theology because that's not the point.
Right. So when you all talk about this with people in the pews, as they say, what are people's reaction? I mean, I know there's a version of mainline church that we love being beaten up about how terrible we are. I'm like, yeah, we are terrible. And there are some that are probably like, no, we don't. That's just them. Like, dude, that's not us. I mean, what are the reactions you're getting from people as you're laying this out? I mean, you do a great job of laying it out, obviously, but like, how are folks receiving this jarring news that kind of we share in some of this blame?
So my favorite introduction to this is the story about how when the National Council of Churches first produced the Revised Standard Version of the Bible, that they gave the first copy to Harry Truman at the White House in the Rose Garden, and then he extolled the book as basically representing his foreign policy. And so I tell that story, then I talk about, Trump hawking the God Bless the USA Bible might have been bad, but at least he was out of office. And I get surprised, right? A lot of people in these traditions don't know these stories. They don't know that story about the Bible. They don't know the story about George Doherty. They don't know about Michael Curry being the anniversary speaker to January 6th. They don't, so they're just shocked to learn this is in their tradition. And I think there's a curiosity to learn more and do better, which I appreciate. Initially, Brian and I thought this book's going to have no audience. Nobody's going to want to buy this. We're just going to tick everybody off. And in reality, what we've gotten is a lot of humility out of it, a lot of desire to, tell us more and what can we do, which is exactly the reaction we wanted.
Yeah.
And I mean, it has been mostly positive. I mean, we do get the pushback, right?
Well, I'm sure.
Most people have been surprised and acknowledgement, but, there's a couple issues I think where particularly we've managed to tick off all of our friends for, talking about how it's our side of the, Christian world that is just, as much to blame here. And we don't necessarily always want it. It's so much easier to be like the guy in the parable that Jesus told, right? Like, thank you, God, I'm not like one of those conservative, Christian nationalists storming the Capitol. And so, there's the issue of the flag in the sanctuary, which is like the hot issue. And, Beau's more pastoral than I am. So he's always about don't just pull it out of there. Let's have a conversation, get people talking. I'm like, get the thing out of there.
Send it to the dry cleaners.
Yeah, that's right. I'm like, take it out of there. If you can't remove something from a sanctuary other than the Bible or the cross about people getting upset, then maybe that proves it was an idol to start with, right? And so it has no business being in there. Or even with, Bishop, Buddy at the National Cathedral, who rightly got a lot of praise and is a big hero right now, the progressive, Christian movement, because she asked, President Trump to show mercy to immigrants and LGBTQ children, which, what a revolutionary idea. Just show mercy. I mean, she couldn't have said it in a more nicer, way. But yeah, if you watch the whole service, Like, that whole service was just chock full of Christian nationalism.
Oh, sure.
I mean, they had the U.S. Marine Chamber Orchestra there singing a bunch of patriotic hymns, My Country 'Tis of Thee, God Bless America, the national anthem. Like, you know, we even in these good progressive spaces, like, we're undermining the prophetic call by also engaging in Christian nationalism still today. And, you know, people do get a little upset when I call out some of our progressive heroes for also being Christian nationalism today.
Right. So I'm gonna make myself vulnerable. So one of my shticks when I talk with people is very similar. Like, we can't just be who we are based on what we're not. Like, I know we all react out of, we don't want to be like them. And I've always said that part of the reason that this also has grown is we've failed to actually articulate our version of Christianity that is not that. Like, we've always formed ourselves, either we're not that or we're so good people will just find us. We don't need to tell anybody about it. We don't need to live it out in public. And so they'll just figure out who we are. Neither of those things obviously work. And so I was always like, well, we just need to tell our story better. But I guess the danger is, like, what point does telling our story better, living it out differently, can that turn into another worldview trying to take over, right? If we want to have people in office who hold our worldview, how do we avoid just becoming that which we have said is not good? Like, I mean, so talk about that. I mean, if we had progressive Christian values coming out and they were talking about it in that way, is that better or worse? I mean, how do we not become this in just a different kind of version?
So I do think that context matters a lot, right? And so I'll be honest, like, the last few weeks, there's been a lot of the debate about the, so-called, big, beautiful bill, right? And there was a lot of Bible thrown around in debates in Congress by Democratic politicians. And I agree with, like, their Bible values, but I found it very problematic, the arguments that they were making from the House and Senate chambers of, this is what the Bible says, and that's why you should vote against this bill. Right? Because what you're asking then is people to adopt your theology, your religion, to take a certain position on legislation. That's getting into the realm of Christian nationalism. Again, I don't think the answer to conservative Christian nationalism is progressive Christian nationalism. Now, give you a really practical example. So I testify in the Missouri legislature from time to time, usually on church state issues, challenging Christian nationalism. I've testified about 40 times, in the last several years. But occasionally I also go on other topics like capital punishment. And if you invite me to come preach at a church on capital punishment, I mean, I'll walk through the scriptures and we can talk about why I think the Bible leads us to oppose capital punishment, why I don't think Christians should support it. But when I go and testify to the Missouri legislature, even though most of them will claim to be Christian, I will identify myself as a Baptist minister, but then I don't say, here's what the Bible says, and this is why you should vote against capital punishment. And we're one of the top 5 states right now in executions. I make arguments that regardless of their religious beliefs, this is why I believe this is what's best for the state and what we should do. And so I'm not asking them to adopt my religion to come to a certain position on a bill. I'm trying to make an argument that anybody, regardless of their religious beliefs, could come to the same conclusion to vote for that bill. And that's why I think context matters, right? So, and I think we forget that context. It's one thing when we're talking in our faith community and what does it look like to live out our faith as a faith community. But when we start making arguments of how should people respond, people who have taken an oath of office to the Constitution in a nation where we do not have an established religion, right? That's different. And I think we have to avoid the temptation to expect people to adopt our right religion, right, over the other people's wrong religion, because then we're just doing the exact same thing as, Mike Johnson.
Yeah.
So I think one of the most difficult questions I've received in the book tour has been, was Martin Luther King Jr. a Christian nationalist? Right here, you've got a Christian pastor, theologian going into the public square, critiquing the government based on his values. And I had to sit with that for a while, right? I had to think about what was going on here. And the answer I ultimately came to that I think is right is that, as Brian mentioned, Christian nationalism is about drawing the circle smaller. It's about using coercion to force a narrow version of Christianity and social order on the whole nation and on everybody. King was trying to expand the Democratic circle. He was trying to help more people in our country have equal voice, equal status. Now, that was motivated by his Christian beliefs, but he wasn't trying to force his theology on other people. He was using his theology that inspired him to pursue small d democracy. And so I think that as Christians, we can absolutely be in the public square. We need to be doing the work of supporting democracy. We need to have a reason for that from our faith perspective. We can live out our values and even ask the government to pursue policies that are aligned with our values. But as Brian mentioned, we have to do it in ways that are non-coercive, and we have to do it in ways that other people can say yes to, that isn't just because I'm a Christian and this is what the Bible says.
Right. Great. That's awesome. I'm learning so much today. That's always great. I'm going to shift us a little bit. So before we jump into kind of just some of the other stuff we do, Brian, you have another book coming out. Tell us a little bit about that and what's going on.
Yeah, thanks. Coming out in October from Chalice, October 7th, but it's available for pre-order anywhere, is The Bible According to Christian Nationalists. And this is a way of looking at how the Bible is really co-opted and misused today in political discourse. And so in the book, I actually unpack 7 different ways of misreading the Bible, give some examples. And I mean, some of these things are ludicrous, so I have fun with them. I critique them, but with some sarcasm as well. And then also the real goal then is to try to help people be prepared against future examples of such misuse of Scripture. And so I'll give you one example, and this is maybe the quickest and easiest one to explain. Is right after the assassination attempt of Donald Trump last July, there was a spike on Google and social media memes. Ephesians 6:11 became the most popular according to Google Trends that it's ever been online. And that was because Trump was shot at 6:11 p.m. Ephesians 6:11 is about the armor of God. Ergo, God saved Donald Trump, right? Now, you're laughing, Bruce. I'm glad you know better. Don't try this in a seminary paper. That kind of exegesis won't work. But seriously, we had pastors and politicians, and you can buy the shirts with Donald Trump in Ephesians 6:11, and he's holding up his fist saying, fight, fight, fight. People were buying this as a proof that God had saved Donald Trump. Now, of course, there's literally no meaning in the numbers. The chapter numbers and the verse numbers are added centuries upon centuries later. They're not in any way connected. Often they're just in the wrong spot, right? I mean, I think you could do a better job putting some of those verse, spots down. And so there's no meaning there, and yet people are reading it as a prophetic reading without even thinking through the theology.
Right.
Right.
Not even to the theology that God does.
Yeah, God was trying to send us a message. Right? That the armor of God was saving Trump. I mean, one, it does seem like the helmet of salvation has a weak spot around the ear, so that's not necessarily the best endorsement there. But that would mean that God had to make sure Trump was shot at 6:11 in order to save Trump at 6:11, which I guess means God shot Donald Trump, right? But they don't actually go to logical conclusions. So what I do is I give a couple examples in that chapter of this, what I call this numerology reading of the Bible. Reading the Bible like a Swiftie, and then unpack why this is a problem.
Brian, why did you have to attack Swifties on the podcast? Now we're going to get all this hate mail.
That's okay. Sometimes I need a little bit in there just to.
I'm sorry. It's me.
That'll be the whole promo video. Is we hate Swifties. Oh, and Christian nationalism.
Yeah. So then after giving these examples and explaining why you can't read the Bible this way and have meaning from the numbers, right? Now hopefully the readers will be prepared the next time, and it's going to happen again, right? There's going to be some meaning to some chapter and verse number. You automatically know, I don't trust that. That's wrong. And so I've got 7 different examples. The Bible as numerology is one of them.
Awesome. I want to look up all of our birthdays in my family and find the book 5-3. What I got to find the right one.
Yeah, you got to flip through all of them to get the best.
Yeah,
one.
you got to figure out the best one.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's in.
Bruce, if you'll give me your credit card number or social security number and your birthday, I'll do it for you.
Oh, I wish I could tell a story in public about something that just happened to a family member that is very much like that. And we're like, oh no, what what? You did? Oh no, please. Anyway, all right, so thank you all. Let me ask you, I'm curious. I wrote one book with my spouse, and we had we had to, at the very beginning, to think through how are we going to do this? What was it like writing together? as much as you can. Like how does, and I'm imagining two PhD people, how do you write together and then get it down small enough to, what was that like writing together? Just a little bit of writing talk.
Yeah, so we get this question a lot because I think people assume, well, it must have made it more complicated. And Brian, you can obviously weigh in here as well, but I think it made our writing process a lot better because if I had a chapter and I got stuck somewhere, I could pass off to Brian, he could take a crack at it, then hand it back to me. Like there was always a backup for each of us, and we did. We passed certain chapters back and forth, and others one of us took the lead on. Where we got in the most struggle was over debates around humor. Brian thinks he's a lot funnier than he actually is, and so he kept trying to put jokes in that I thought weren't that funny, and I kept trying to take them out. So about half of them made it in. So
if you want a comparison check, right? And I do always have to remind people at this point that only one of us has ever won awards for humor writing.
Oh man,
it's not Beau. So Beau wasn't there to cut anything out. The Bible According to Christian Nationalists. Everyone's going to have to buy both books now, Baptizing America and the Bible to Christian Nationalists. One of them is a lot funnier than the other, and you can decide if you like the humor.
That's a great flex. That should be your intro. One of us, only one of these authors has received this, and it's not him. That's great. That's wonderful. Thank you all. So let's move on to a couple things I do with all of our guests. We give you a little bit of heads up so you didn't have to come in totally cold, but I do this thing called nerdy and niche. This, what are the things, is there anything that you all do, interested in, passionate about? I do tell the story all the time on every podcast. I ask somebody this question and they answer to me in Klingon, which was the best response I've ever had. And everybody knows mine, so I don't share them as much anymore. But Brian, what about you? Is there anything that just randomly you're super interested in, passionate about, that may or may not have anything to do with your vocation or what we've been talking about?
Yeah, because my vocation is my nerdy and niche, right?
That is true.
I did a PhD in political communication, studying religious rhetoric and presidential campaigns. But anyways, I took your question as being, what do I do that's not what I do all the time, right? Yep. And it's maybe not as nerdy, but it is my escape thing, and that is I play the cello. And so, in fact, if I'm not preaching somewhere at a church, then I'm in the church orchestra, and that's my afternoon when I'm need a break from writing or watching some crazy conservative Christian nationalist event, which I do a lot because that is my weird nerdy niche thing, right. Is I watch these events and go to them. That's my break, is I go play the cello and just kind of unwind that way. And so that's my thing that I'm passionate about outside of work.
Have you been playing all your life? Would you grow up?
Yeah, playing? I started taking cello lessons in school when I was in 5th grade.
Okay. That's awesome. Great. See, look at that. Something we don't know about each other. All right, Beau, what about you? What's your thing?
So I hate flying. I do it, but I am one of those terrified white knuckles passengers. I think every time there's a ding, it means the plane's in, catastrophe. I just hate flying. Oh. And I have discovered this YouTube channel called Captain Steve, where he goes through airplane disasters and explains basically what went wrong and also good examples.
Why would you watch that?
No wonder you're scared of flying.
Because he goes through all of these things that could, he'll do one where the plane has an engine failure and it lands safely, and he'll walk you through everything the pilots did, and he's got the air traffic control conversations that you hear, and so it's really calming to realize there's all these professionals making all of this work, and even when crazy stuff happens, they manage to get the plane safely back on the ground. So it's like a peek inside what's going on in the cockpit and the control tower that you don't see when you're holding onto the seat white-knuckled and shaking from the turbulence.
Well, on your next flight, just remember that Doge fired them all, so all the smart people aren't there anymore.
I haven't flown since Elon Musk took over, so.
Do you also watch it on your tablet so the other person next to you can see that you're watching
that's good.
Flight destruction? Watch this video of a plane crashing and burning, but you can hear the air traffic controllers, so that's cool.
I don't really believe in karma, and yet I would never do that on the plane, because that just there's just tempting the fates.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm going to hedge my bets on it, but so I'm not going to do that one, because that does feel, that would be. It's like when you're watching a movie on the thing, and all of a sudden there's this sex scene or something that's happening that they've edited it down, but you're still like, oh, people are watching me watch this thing Or like, I'm going to watch a cartoon. And then people are like, why is this guy watching cartoons? Yeah. So no flight destruction things. Well, thank you all for sharing your vulnerabilities and your passions for that. As we end, though, what are you listening to? What are you reading? And what are you watching? What are the things that are going on in your ears and your eyes these days?
So most of my reading right now is dissertation related, which is interesting, but not always enjoyable. But my wife and I have been watching the TV show Hacks on Max, and that has been wonderful. It's been a nice relief from kind of the craziness going on in the world right now. So if somebody hasn't watched Hacks, highly recommend.
Good. Music, podcasts, anything, Beau, that you listen to? Or is it
Dangerous Dogma?
Dangerous Dogma, you're right. So I'm a little bit of a personal finance nerd, and there's this show called The Pete the Planner Show. And Pete the Planner is this former stand-up comedian turned personal finance guru. And it's like 80% him being funny and 20% personal finance stuff. So it's really interesting. So maybe that's more nerdy and niche, but it's there in what I'm listening to as well.
I love that you're attracted to like Steve the whatever it was and Pete the person. And
he also likes Bob the Builder.
I was going to say, it feels like there's like, yeah.
I really appreciate that I'm bearing my soul and all I'm getting from the two of you is mockery.
Bruce, you and I should write a book together and then it would just have lots of jokes.
Because I think I'm pretty funny too, which is, yeah. There's I probably got from my editor, probably not as funny as you think.
Yeah, I'm going to write a book called In Defense of Kindness and share it with you.
I've heard that's really funny, though. That's
yeah.
Though I had to that one book they tried to do and not have any religious language in it, and so I thought I'd be really good at that. And then the first edit back was like all this stuff about that I had slipped in all this language, and they were like, "Yeah, you got to take all this out." I'm like, "Huh? I guess, yeah." Anyway, so Brian, what are you listening to, watching, reading?
Yeah, so I speaking of flying and watching, I just flew back from Australia a couple days ago, which is like that's like my time when I catch up on the movies because I never go to the
12
theater.
movies,
so it's like, yeah, I know, right? So I got to watch a lot of the new movies. But so here's the answer I will give you. I'll give it because of when we're recording, it's the fresh news. Our nightly routine as a family is to watch Colbert on late night, and I've been a huge Colbert fan for decades, ever since he was on the Daily Show before the Colbert Report. But then starting last year, my son, who's 13, started watching it with us. We didn't realize he was up until we heard the laughing on the stairwell, around the corner. And so then it became a family routine, and it's been really cathartic for him as well. We live in a red city, in a red county, in a red state. And so he's enjoying the fact of knowing like, hey, here's this funny, smart person who doesn't like Trump. And it's just like really helped him make sense of the news. And so I'm lamenting the fact that CBS is, giving in to Trump and canceling Colbert, but I'm sure he'll land somewhere in the future as well. But that's part of our ritual, if you will, of just like dealing with this moment is you got to laugh, and otherwise you're going to cry.
So I have a theory on this, and we'll see if it comes to fruition, but I'll put it on the record and say it here first. I think Colbert ends up back at the Daily Show.
No, they're going to cancel that too.
You think so?
Are
they really?
They need to kill Stewart and Colbert, and it's the same parent company. It's all same. It's all part of the deal.
And didn't the Daily Show, for those who are recording this on July 18th, so you can go back and look at the news around that time. I thought the Daily Show is now having its best ratings ever. Like that it is really, wow.
And Colbert, Colbert was twice. What's the guy on NBC? This idea that it wasn't financially working. He wins late night comedy. Yeah. They've got the ratings. It was the only late night show that was up on the networks in ratings, second quarter over first quarter, right? Like this is all about Trump and Paramount working to clean out people that Trump doesn't like.
It is amazing how companies, individuals, universities have caved and just sort of have done that. Anything else you're listening to, watching, reading that's not connected to religion and politics? No.
I really should do more of that. You're right. I should get a life. So every year we do a best, our favorite books of the year, type of write up a public witness. And that's my forcing Beau still doesn't do this. But I do force myself to put a novel on there every year. And sometimes I do have to read a couple of them to get there, but that's it forces myself to read something beyond, the boring, religion and politics world. And so, that expands my universe because, some of the great prophets in scripture were great novelists. So,
Well, and I think there's this also, you've seen this trend where people who write kind of nonfiction and are in that, like, then write a novel. Like, that is one of my dreams. But I've also read a couple of them. I'm like, yeah, you need to stick with the things that you do really well. But like Brian McLaren just came out with a novel, and I have not read it yet, so that was not about Brian. But I'm intrigued to see how that all translates. Yeah. I do share about what I'm listening to, watching, because that changes all the time. Apparently, I need to move to Canada because the last 3 shows that I've binged have all been Canada based. Sky Med, which is basically based in Canada about the people who fly around, the paramedics and pilots. So these are not deep thinking. This is like mind candy drama stuff. And then I just watched North of North, which is a Netflix show about a young woman, Inuit young woman trying to find her way, comedy. And then I just started with another one called Sullivan's Crossing. I watched total trash and drivel as my escapism. So, but I realized they're all Canada based. So.
And have you already done Schitt's Creek, or have you not done Schitt's Creek yet?
I've done Schitt's Creek, yes.
Yes. So that's in that whole genre. It's in that whole.
Yep.
I know. I'm just like, I know Canada's not the best either, but there's part of me that's like, yeah, I might need to do that.
We're all making our plans to move north right now, right?
Man, I don't know where I think I would go to the Philippines. If I'm going to go somewhere that's, everybody everywhere is somewhat terrible. Although I might actually choose Australia, New Zealand. I got to spend some time there a couple years ago. We spent 5 weeks at the Women's World Cup, and I fell in love with both New Zealand and Australia. So maybe I can figure out a gig there. Who knows? Anyway, so let's wrap up. Let's start with Beau. How can we get in touch with you? How can we find you? All the links will be in the show notes, but let us know. What's the best way to connect with you?
Yeah, so Brian and I write Substack together, a Public Witness, publicwitness.wordandway.org, or I'm still a contributing editor, so my email address is beunderwood@wordandway.org. Always glad to hear from people, and I keep the conversation going.
Great. Brian?
Yeah. In addition to there, we have Dangerous Dogma podcast, and I guess if we're giving out all our personal information here, my email is bkaylor@wordandway.org, and also I'm active on YouTube and Blue Sky at Brian Kaylor, so people can follow me there as we continue to think more about Christian nationalism and the news and religion today.
Great, awesome.
And Brian's cell phone number is...
And the last 4 digits of his Social Security, and his first pet and high school mascot. And
that's the danger of writing with somebody that you're close friends with. You might start to learn all that information.
Well, and I sometimes I get these security questions like, I know I'm not going to remember that if I'm asked again. Like, right now, my best friend in high school was that. But then, a month from now, I'd be like, no, it wasn't him. It was so-and-so. Like, I just don't, yeah.
You also have to decide if you trust your siblings, because they can answer all of your security questions from your childhood.
No, not at all. Not at all. I'm the oldest of 4. We trust them with nothing.
That's right.
No, that's not true. That's not true. They're wonderful. If anybody, they never listen to my stuff anyway, so it's fine. All right, you all. Again, thank you for listening in. We're glad to welcome Brian and Beau. Go out and buy their books. All the links will be in the show notes. Chalice is a wonderful publisher, and there's a lot of great stuff there. Very consistent theologically, ideologically, all that. So make sure you go over there and shop out quite a bit. Go to all the places where you pick up podcasts and rate and review, subscribe, share with your friends, share with your neighbors, share with the person you're standing in line with right now at the supermarket. Again, thanks for joining us on the Amalgamation Podcast, and we will see you next time. This podcast was hosted by Bruce Reyes-Chow, produced by Emmy Hicks, edited by Desiree McFarland, with music by Marissa Magdal-Laron, and inspired by ancestors past and generations to come. Please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And be sure to subscribe to the Amalgamation newsletter at reyes-chow.com. Until next time, thanks for listening.